It's of primary importance that in relationship to spirituality that we have an absolute love of truth. That's what's, in one sense, that's all that's necessary. A real love of truth. Truth meaning reality, meaning what is. What really, really is, as opposed to what we imagine to be, or may be, or our ideas about what is. But it's so important to have a real love of truth, of what really, really is. Because if we don't, we can almost be assured that we're going to end up in some delusion. How could you not end up in delusion if you don't actually value the truth? You may end up in the truth by some sort of accident. You know, sometimes you can do everything wrong in life and everything goes well anyway, in some sense. You know, actually, probably most of our lives are somewhat an example of that. Not with you. I'm talking to the wrong crowd. I'm sure you've done almost everything just right in life, right? And everything worked out just so well because of how wonderful and perfect we all were. So already this miracle of things kind of work out in spite of ourselves is probably somewhat comforting in some ways. But it is so important to have this love of truth, of what's real, of what is really real. Because this kind of interest, this kind of love is something that is already, it starts out being transcendent of self. Love of what's real is already something that's transcendent. It's transcendent of one's own personal wants and personal desires and personal things we insist upon and judgments and all of that. The real desire and love of what's truth is in many ways already, it's a transcendent desire. It's a transcendent orientation because it's not fundamentally self-centered. Of course, I think if most people were honest, they would say, well, part of my interest is because I think it's going to help things work out much better for me. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine to be interested in truth in part because you don't want to suffer or you don't want to cause suffering, or you don't want to be in conflict, or all of that is totally understandable, and probably any honest person will have that as part of their concern. But if all of our concern is only with ourself, then it's going to make everything really difficult. If all we want is to feel better, which we all want to feel, I don't know if we all want to feel better, but we all want to feel good. Given the choice, you'd rather feel good than feel rotten. Most people. Not everybody. Some people feel good by feeling rotten. It's kind of weird. But at least some people feel like they are who they are when they feel rotten. But nonetheless. But it's this real love of truth which has the capacity to always draw us out of our own preconceived viewpoints, our own fixations, right? Because enlightenment could easily be defined, and probably in some ways most accurately defined, is the realization of reality. Realization of what is. So you are seeing, knowing what is instead of what isn't. Right? Enlightened, well, there's not an enlightened being, but nonetheless, an enlightened being will simply see and know and perceive what is. Unenlightenment means nothing more than seeing, knowing, and perceiving what isn't. Or, as a lot of spiritual teachers have called it, ignorance, misunderstanding, right? About the nature of oneself, about the nature of existence, about the nature of anything. That's basically what enlightenment is. When we come into the realization of what is, we're in the realization of reality, therefore at that instant, we're not divided. There's nothing, that moment, there's nothing in you that's in opposition to what's real and true. And when you're not in opposition to what's real and true, how does it feel? It feels really, really good, right? Everybody in this room knows that. Some of you may not know what it's like to see things as they completely and absolutely really are, but everybody knows that feeling temporarily of not being in opposition to anything feels good. Right? For most people, it comes upon them sort of almost by chance, by accident. You just wake up and you have a good day, or you're not in opposition, or you fly to Tahiti and you're not in opposition, because you're on vacation. Sadly, most people will very quickly find something to be in opposition to, even in Tahiti, right? Or you fall in love and you're not in opposition. Right? For most human beings, actually, when they fall in love, even though falling in love is in large part, it's wonderful, but a high form of delusion. Right? Not that being love is delusion, that's not delusion. The act of falling in love, that particular time period, however long it lasts, where you're not in opposition, right? So you're beloved. Everything they do is cute, right? Oh, look at that. He always wears 2 different color socks. Isn't that just adorable? Isn't that lovely? And right? He squeezes toothpaste from the top, and so every time I use it, I have to squeeze it from the bottom so it comes back out again. Isn't he just delightful? Oh, he's so cute, right? And when you're in that state of not opposition, it feels really good, doesn't it? I love it. So the closest that most human beings that I've seen ever get to the feeling of being undivided is actually when they're deeply involved in the delusion of falling in love. Isn't that ironic? It's ironic, right? Now you may come out of that and then start to discover what love truly and really is. That's not something I'll probably get into tonight, but sadly most people never seem to be able to make that transition from romance to love. But nonetheless, but there's that feeling when you're not in opposition. And it's very free and very open, and it seems like everything is possible until you go into opposition with what is. Right? Everything seems possible. Very open, very free. That's probably in large part why a certain segment of people, they actually love falling in love. They don't love being in love, but they love falling in love. They're like serial falling in lovers. They fall in love every couple of months or whatever, every couple of weeks. And the reason is because as long as when you're in that state of falling in love, they get to taste that beautiful happiness, well-being, maybe even bliss of not being in opposition. And it's absolutely wonderful, right? Everything in us sort of is energized, is enlivened, is more awake in that state. Now, sadly, very, very few human beings will be able to sustain that for very long. The same things that you loved, that you thought were very cute and sort of adorable, will be later probably some of the same things that you will then use to decide that you don't like the person, right? They always wear they can never get their socks straight. Why was it so cute 6 months ago, and it's an absolute, it's cause for absolute separation now, right? Well, it's just because you changed your mind about things. That's all. And of course, egos can't sustain non-division for very long. I mean, they just can't do it, because an ego is basically it's just in opposition to what is most of the time, right? To some extent. So, with brief interludes, like little vacations, you know. And then ego wants the environment around them to change so that the ego's not in opposition with it. So it can get back to that feeling of not being in opposition, right? So, oh honey, if you just changed, then I wouldn't be in opposition to you, and then it would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Right? What was that movie? Very famous movie where the guy says, why can't a woman be more like a man? My Fair Lady, right? And that's kind of like a perfect summation of ego, right? Ego would just be like, why can't everybody be like me? You know? Of course, some egos are really happy that everybody isn't like them, because, you know, they're not even happy to be around themselves. But so there are these moments, these little tastes of what it's like not to be in opposition to what is. Lovely. Fantastic. And that's not the same as enlightenment, but it's a taste of what it feels like, right? And that's why everybody is sort of drawn into that place. Everything we do for entertainment, for relief, is to come out of opposition with ourselves, is it not? Whether you are meditating or taking a drug or going to the movies or watching your TV or eating your favorite food, whatever it is, it's temporarily, to some extent, allowing you to come out of opposition to what is, right? This is such a wonderful TV program that I've forgotten all of my arguments with the universe. And with you, honey, that's sitting right next to me. It's such a wonderful program that I'm not preoccupied with my argument with you. You see what I mean? So if you think everything we do for entertainment to help us feel better is actually, you can measure it directly against how much it helps us not be in opposition. If only because we're distracted. So most forms of our entertainment are actually forms of distraction. It's distracting us from our argument with what is. And there's nothing bad about that. It's perfectly fine. It's good for human beings to be distracted from their opposition to what is. Otherwise they go a little nutty. I mean, they go nutty anyway. But it sort of relieves a little bit of the pressure. But to have this real love affair with truth, because it's truth that reconnects you with reality. It's truth that reconnects you with the way things really are, with existence itself. Truth connects you with the existence of you. Right? The truth is also the truth of you. So when we really love the truth, we're really looking for the most, there's nothing more underlying, there's nothing more foundational than what is, than reality. You can't get more foundational than reality, right? You can't, that's sort of foundational. And that's what spirituality is really moving about, connecting you back with the realization of reality, the realization of your own existence. So when we're not in connection when we're not in the realization, when we're not in the truth of what we are, much less anything else, but just oneself, then there's opposition. And we think I'm in opposition for all these reasons. There's many, many, many reasons that we justify our opposition, isn't it? The state of the world, my upbringing, my lover, my next door neighbor, the dog that I bought that I now don't want, whatever it is. Right? The situation, my job. We always think if I could just fix these things, everything would be better. Including, if I could just fix myself, everything would be better. But it wouldn't be better. Because you can fix an illusion, but it's still an illusion, right? Or more accurately, there's no way to fix an illusion, right? You can put pearls on a pig, but you can't stop it from squealing. You're not going to make it beautiful because you put a pearl necklace on it. It doesn't help. So you can try to improve yourself all you want, but if your fundamental sense of your own self is flawed, not much is going to change, is it? Not much is really going to change. And spirituality is basically, well, the word says it, it's based on one of the fundamental realities about you. Me, us, however you want to see it. The reality of spirit. Where we are actually the presence. The presence of spirit, or a spiritual presence. Now the illusion, of course, that which is not in connection, not in harmony with reality, so therefore how could it lead to anything but various forms of discord? The illusion is that I am a particular human being. Male, female, smart, not smart, whatever it is. I am a particular person that has a particular name. That is what I am. Now, if that's what we hold as true, if that's what we see as ourself, and that's what we maintain as ourself, you can spiritualize the illusion about yourself, but it's still going to be illusory, and so you'll still end up in conflict, right? It's like when egos try to be really spiritual. They just end up in conflict, right? Because egos aren't really spiritual. Egos are divided. Spirit is one, egos are divided. Mm-hmm. So, when we really come into a true understanding, which we can only do when we really want the truth. As long as we want to change everything, it's going to be very hard for us to see the truth of anything. Because we'll be so busy changing that we'll have no time to look at what's true. Right? And so that's really the first and most primary order of the entirety of spirituality, is that love affair with what's real, with what's true. Mm-hmm. And it runs right through the heart of the assumptions that we have about what's true. Mm-hmm. When we have assumption about what's true that aren't, it leads to division and suffering. Mm-hmm. It's like anything that's not true. Well, we all in our history learned about when they thought that the universe, that the earth was the center of the universe. Remember when our Western religions had this whole idea that this earth was, everything revolved around this earth, us, right? Egoic in the extreme, right? Not only am I the center, the whole universe revolves around us. Anyway, but that's what most everybody believed, right? And it had these hideous consequences. If you studied history, it wasn't just like it was a mistaken idea and that was unfortunate and later became, they corrected it. It's like, no. There was whole theologies that came out of this and modes of behavior that came out of this, many of which were extraordinarily divisive and violent and cruel, right? Because we thought everything revolves around us. The whole universe. And then we see it's different. Oh. That idea, it wasn't just that that idea changed, but once that idea changed, a tremendous number of the old ideas started to break down, right? And it made so much possible, right? So much more became possible. And what did we do when people started to suggest that maybe the earth wasn't what the whole universe revolved around? What did a lot of our ancestors do? So you can't say that. You into the prison with you, onto the stake with you, into the fire. You're jailed. You're persecuted. You're silenced. You're whatever, right? So we are not always as open-minded about truth as we like to think we are. We all like to think we're very open-minded, do we not? It's always the other guy that's more closed-minded than we are. If everybody else was just different and everything would be fine, that's closed-minded. But when we see that many of us human beings are in our own ways very close to truth, because the truth's going to go right through the center of our illusions, yours and mine. Right? Right through the center. And so it's so important that you start from a certain orientation that's truthful. And when I say start, I don't mean like the beginning of, I do mean the beginning of spirituality, but I mean the whole way through. If your orientation is wrong, then you're going to end up not in the truth, unless you just happen to sort of get graced into it. It's all grace, but unless some force comes down and yanks you out of the direction that you're going in. So even if you take something really simple, take something that a lot of people do in spiritual circles, take something as simple as meditating. If you start off on the wrong orientation, you're probably going to stay in the wrong orientation for decades and decades and decades. It's very easy to happen. It has happened to most people who've ever meditated historically. They've started off in the wrong direction. That's why the vast majority of people who've said meditated in order to spiritually awaken or get enlightened didn't. Right? I mean, if we examine why does it work that way? Why are all these people trying so hard, and meditating all the time or going into monasteries or whatever this for thousands of years, and what's the success rate? It's embarrassing. For every 100 people that dedicate themselves to abiding self-realization, how many succeed? I think you'd have to start with more than 100 to get one out of there. You might have to start with, 5 or 10,000. And then we conclude, well, it's just because it's difficult. No, it's not just because it's difficult, because it's not difficult. It's because usually we start off on an orientation that is actually derived from our illusion and expected to get us to truth. So we can start off with the simplest of ideas. It's really hard to realize enlightenment. If you believe that, you'll be in a totally contrary direction to reality, because in reality, it isn't difficult. But if you have a belief in difficulty, guess what it's probably going to be? Pretty damn difficult. And I won't go into all of them, but that's just one idea, right? One idea for one activity. And if that one idea isn't in some alignment with what is, that one idea is going to go in opposition to what is. Much less all the other ideas that we walk around with. So this love of truth is so vital. Because if we have this love of truth, what are we like internally when we really have a love of truth? We're extraordinarily open. Because we must be open if we want to know what's true. We're very, very open. Very, very available. I really want to know what's true. Right? It's very hard to go into opposition with what is when you're very, very open and interested in what's true. Right? So when we're very, very open, because we have this love of what's really true, what's really real, which means we're not primarily in love with asserting what we think is true, what we imagine to be true. Most human beings are in love with what they think is true and what they imagine to be true. They're literally in love for it, to the extent that they'll die for it. They'll go to war for it. They'll kill their neighbor over it. For nothing more than an idea that has no basis in reality. That's how important our ideas are to most of us human beings. But if we have a love of truth, if we find a love of truth somewhere along the way, if a love of truth blossoms in us, all of a sudden everything is thrown into a state of openness, a state of question. All of a sudden everything's possible, right? Can you imagine if the people throughout our history that made the greatest discoveries, we'll just say in science, had very fixed and rigid ideas about the way of everything was, nothing would be discovered. Right? Nothing would be discovered, because at any point in time, most people think that we all know the way that things are going here. Right? And then those few people that go, well, I just love truth and I love discovery and I really want to find out, and I'll question anything just to find out, what the heck? They're the ones that discover everything interesting, isn't it? They're the ones that discover what's interesting. And so spiritually, it's the same way. Right? It's exactly the same way. The same phenomena. That love of what's true, what's real. Because when you have that, then your power of observation is very powerful, very keen. Then you have that ingredient that can help spark realization. Then you can really look at the nature of your own being, your own existence. To ask the question, everything has to be possible. What am I really? Everything has to be possible. Maybe everything I've ever learned about myself, maybe it's not really true. Maybe it is true, but equally, maybe it isn't true. That's the openness. That's the sort of spiritual openness. I think I'm a person. I think I'm a male. I think I'm a female. I think I'm whatever. Caucasian, Hispanic, African American, whatever. I think I'm an American. I think I'm a Buddhist. I think I'm a Christian. I think I'm a Jew. I think I'm all these things. I think I'm a relatively good person. Or probably more commonly, if you got inside the psyches of most people, I really think I'm not such a great person. I think I'm all these things. Are any of them actually true? To even ask the question honestly, one must love truth. One must be open that anything ends up being possible. Because it's in that space where the spark of realization happens. Right? That's why, historically, it's breaking down a little bit in the present time, but historically, so many people that chased enlightenment didn't get it. And one of the great reasons is because most of them had a tremendous amount of very fixed ideas about what enlightenment was, what they had to do to get there, how they were going to get there. They had many very fixed ideas about it. Right? And so, you know, if you're in California and you want to go to New York and you start out by walking into the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, you know, the chances you get to New York are a little bit slim, aren't they? Right? Or, how do I get to New York City? Well, get in a rocket and just blast straight off. You'll get there. In other words, if your direction is wrong, your chance of hitting the right thing are remote at best, right? If you're lucky, the rocket runs out of fuel, 100 miles into the atmosphere, and the rocket falls down right in the middle of New York City from sheer stupid luck. You know? And then you climb out, and what do you tell most people? I know how to get to New York City. Get in a rocket and go straight up, right? You know. That's why I always say, you know, if someone was sitting on a bar stool, fell over, hit their head on the floor, and ended up enlightened, that doesn't mean that the correct practice is to do bar stool tipping. Right? It just means that person was damn lucky. Or reality was ready to wake up through that person, or however you wanted to think about it or word it. But that love of truth is vital. And I say the love of truth is vital because it's not just vital for that realization. Aha. Because of course, if you have the love of truth and you start to look at things, what you realize very quickly is almost everything you think is true that you don't actually know that it's true. If you're open, it will be an unavoidable fact you'll bump into. You may not like it when you bump into it. You might be thrilled by it. Wow, everything I look at that I think is true, as soon as I look at it and question whether I really know that it's true, as soon as I do that, it all becomes at least a big question mark. Some people will be sort of thrilled by that. Most people will not want anything to do with that. But that's what the trajectory of spirituality is that you really love what is real. Because what's real is another word for enlightenment, self-realization, God, spirit, pure consciousness. All these are just ways of saying what's really real. It appears one way. Everybody in this room, we all appear to be very limited human beings, very distinct, very different from each other, and very separate. It appears that way. That's the way it looks. There's be no sense in arguing with that. Except if it appears different to you. It happens to appear different to me, but nonetheless, for the sake of the argument, it appears that way. But you know, at one point it also appeared as though the universe revolved around the earth. It also appeared as though the earth was flat. And everybody agreed upon it. Lots of things have appeared to be true that didn't end up being true. And so when we accept the appearance of things, then we can ask the deeper question, well, I appear to be a particular human being only. Now, is that actually true? Now, if you were to sit around and think about that question, you'd just be engaged in philosophy, which in terms of awakening is relatively useless. Lots of people have sat around thinking about things for their whole lives, people that are much brighter than you and I probably, and it didn't get them anywhere except thinking. So it's not something you just sit around thinking, it's something you sit around looking into, exploring. That's really what meditation is. The act of silently exploring, silently watching, silently looking. What is this thing called me? And through this sort of silent observation, you don't have to come to a conclusion. If you come to a conclusion, you will stop the process quickly. It's not about coming to some mental conclusion, it's about coming to the realization, right? That's what it's about. Now, it's not only about coming to the realization, because what happens is in spirituality is a lot of people think, I will just have a realization. I'll just have this breakthrough into this great aha moment. Aha, I get it. Oh, I thought I was just a somebody and I end up being, no thing. Or the nothing that's everything. However you want to put it. Aha, great, wonderful. And they think, that's it. I have awakened. I will go buy my enlightenment t-shirt, put a star on my forehead and congratulate myself. Fortunately, most people don't quite go that far. But one of the funny things when my wife Mukti started to teach about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, something like that, she would come home to me quite often and she would say, Adya, what is going on? I keep talking to these people and they keep telling me they're awake and they're not. And I would say, welcome to spirituality, honey. It doesn't mean that they didn't have a significant moment, it didn't mean that they didn't have something that might have been an awakening 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 2 days ago. But what it meant, what she saw is, when they walked in that door to see her, they weren't awakened. And of course, that's all that matters, isn't it? It doesn't matter what's in the past. What matters is right here, right now. Right? That's all that matters. Are we awake? Is awakeness awake? Are we awake to the reality of our own existence, to all of existence? Are we awake right here, right now? That's all that matters. Last week, it mattered last week, but it doesn't matter this week, right? So it's important, yes, awakening can come in a flash, in a moment, aha. Especially when we're not striving for it. Because of course, striving is based on one of those false ideas. Struggling is based on one of those ideas that's not in harmony with reality, right? Striving is based on the idea that, number one, my striving is useful in terms of awakening. Right? It's going to actually get me somewhere. And it's also based on the idea that enlightenment is something that I get, something that I attain. It's based on the idea that enlightenment is something that is not here now and that I must work very hard at getting. Right? That idea is completely false. It's totally invalid. That's why you can struggle and 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 spiritually get pretty much nowhere. Except tired. Now, if you get tired enough, you might totally exhaust yourself. I mean, totally exhaust yourself. I mean exhaust yourself so you don't have an ounce of spiritual, psychic energy left. And you'll stop struggling. And at the moment that you stop struggling, it's just possible that everything will open up. Aha! But you didn't get there because you struggled. It happened because you stopped struggling, right? Because the struggle's based on an idea that has no basis in reality. Because the reality is that what you are is the reality. Trying to become spiritual is a ridiculous endeavor because you already are spirit. So if you start from an idea that I'm going to try to get spiritual, you're starting off from something that has no basis in reality, right? You are spirit. You are the one. If you are the one, where do you think you're going? Right? If you're the one, there's not somewhere to go and there's not something to get. If there's anything to do, it is to divest yourself of all ideas about you being other than the one. Get rid of those ideas and the realization will just, it'll be like slipping on a banana peel. You'll just fall right into it. And even when the falling into it happens, there must remain this love of truth. Because otherwise the ego is going to go, oh, I got there. Which isn't true, right? Has no basis in reality. No, you did not get there. You realized that reality was always there. And the person trying to get there was a figment of your imagination. But it's very easy to think, I got there. I finally, oh my God, something wonderful just happened. And I attained it. And wow. And what's going to happen very quickly is you're going to become afraid of losing it. Oh no, I might lose it. Right? Because I didn't create it, that means I could lose it. I'm not in control of it. And that makes me very frightened that I could lose heaven. So, oops, I think I lost it. Right? So just because everything opens up doesn't mean you can't get one of those false ideas back in your head. Right? Usually you do get one of those false ideas back in your head temporarily. But neither is the whole of spirituality just a matter of realization. Someone wrote me, and they were recounting a meeting with another teacher, and this teacher suggested that, what you need to do next is to now start to manifest in your life what you realized. And this person, thought, well, that was, the statement like that teacher must have been an illusion because they've obviously got ideas of what spirituality is supposed to look like, right? What awakening is supposed to look like in the world, and it's already the one, and it's already da-da-da-da-da-da. And so there's nothing, you don't need to, they're manifesting it as a ridiculous idea to start out with, and all you have to do is realize. You probably wouldn't agree with that if you had to hang out around a person who believes in that. Because as quite a few in this room know, that you can realize something that you do not manifest. And as a saying long before I came around goes, to know and not to be is not yet to fully know. Once you fully know, then what you know and what you are and what you do will all sync up into a harmonious expression, right? And so it's not only about a realization, awakening, it's also about the capacity to manifest that view, right? Because when you realize, if you really realize, really deeply, that everything is actually one. It has a profound effect on the way you move in the world. Right? If you realize, and that's just one part of realization. If you realize it's all one, if it's true, if it's a half realization, it'll just be a realization in your head, and you very well may go about acting to be the same old person you were to start with. Right? That's very common. But when it goes really deep, all of a sudden it spontaneously starts to alter the way you move in the world. Not according to an idea of how you should be in the world or how awakening or enlightenment should look, because none of those shoulds are true, but just a natural and spontaneous, we all act according to what we perceive and believe. Do we not? Most people act entirely according to what they believe. Which is a darn shame, because people believe in the most ridiculous things. So all of our beliefs are actually based in duality, right? So almost all of our beliefs are based in opposition. This should be, this shouldn't be. We'll just start with those. Could you imagine a world where should and shouldn't disappeared? Just you woke up in the morning and all of a sudden somehow miraculously should and shouldn't disappeared from everybody in the world. An ego would think, God, that makes me very nervous. We would all go nuts, you know. If I didn't think that I shouldn't steal your car when I wanted it, I would just take it, right? Which, if you're an egoic consciousness, it's true, right? That's a pathological narcissistic ego, right? That there is no shouldn't, right? So if you give a spiritual value, which means a value that's based in reality, to an ego, it's not a good idea. Right? Many traditions have talked about, come back and reported the view of the enlightened view. Like, it's beyond good and evil, beyond right and wrong. Well, if you see that, if that's your view, and not your belief, but it's a fact that ultimate reality is what is, it has a deep impact on the way you behave. And the way you behave is a manifestation of an undivided mind, undivided heart, and undivided consciousness. Guess what that might look like? How do you behave on some days that you feel less divided? You know those days where everything's pretty good and you don't feel so divided and you don't feel wound up and you don't feel in opposition to what is? How do you behave on those days? Relatively good, right? Better than most days. You don't behave good because you should behave good, because it's morally correct to behave good. You behave good because you're less divided. Now imagine you're totally undivided. How are you going to behave then? See, and it will be totally natural and spontaneous and, right? That's how it will be, that's how you'll behave. You'll behave from that state of consciousness. But imagine you give this spiritual truth, that the truth, reality is beyond good and evil, beyond right and wrong, beyond should and shouldn't, and give it to an ego. Do you want to be around that ego? I don't. It's a relatively true statement, but it's not good in hands of an ego. You know, it's like giving a baby a machine gun. Or probably more like putting a baby in the seat of a tank and giving it the keys. You know, not a particularly good thing to do. So spiritual truths understood from the egoic perspective are very dangerous. Spiritual truths understood from the perspective of reality are liberating and freeing and transforming of the way we move in the world. They do transform the way we move in the world. We become a benevolent presence in the world, not because we should, or we're trying to be, or even because we want to be, but because that's the way we move when we're truly undivided inside. And so, realization taken all the way very much affects the way the quality of our relationship with the world, with each other. And it all has it's all rooted in a love of truth, in a love of finding what's true, right? What's really real? What am I really? What are you really? What is this world really? What is the ultimate reality really? And truly, all you need is that love. That's what you need. You need that love. If you don't have the love of truth, all the how-tos in the world are not going to make up for not loving the truth. There's lots of people who know all the how-tos about everything. You know? I remember years ago when I went to this, I went so many places. In some temple or monastery, I can't remember if it was a temple or a monastery. I think it was a temple. And I was in this temple, and I'm in the kitchen and doing what you do in Zen temples and monasteries, chopping vegetables, you know. Meditate and chop. And I had a discussion with one of the, students that had been there a long time. And they just said, they made a statement. I won't go into what we were talking about, but if you do that, you can't be a Buddhist. You can't be a good Buddhist and do that at the same time. And at first I was kind of, young, and I was like 20 years old, young and intimidated, like, I've just been, chastised. And then it occurred to me two things. Number one, I don't know if what this person just said is true or not. I'm going to look into this. Number two, I never wanted to be a good Buddhist anyway. I wanted to know the truth. If Buddhism was going to help me, then I'm all for it. If it gets in the way, I'm going to jettison as fast as I jettison a bad pair of sneakers. And that's kind of what it comes down to. Do we want to be somebody, or do we want the truth? It's not that they're incompatible necessarily. You could be a lover of truth and a Buddhist or a Christian or anything else. But the question becomes, what's my highest priority? What do I really love? Does that make sense? So what I realized, I think it's probably true for everything, is, most Buddhists love being Buddhists. When you get down to it, that's one of their highest values. Not all of them. It would be an overstatement, but you say the same thing, about a Christian or anybody, most, whatever. Or if you're a Democrat, most Democrats love being Democrats. Right? They love being Republicans. You know what I mean? That's it. They like having that identity. If the truth came along that disagreed with it, well, the hell with truth. What I want is to be this person. I want this ideology. But when you have that love of truth, that's when you're filled with the Spirit. Because that's where it comes from. It's not an abstract truth. It's not like, it sounds abstract, but it's not. It is that which connects you directly to Spirit, directly to reality. The truth shall set you free. Jesus saying, I am the truth, the light, and the way. And when you have this in your heart, then nothing can stop you for long. Because you run into your fixated beliefs, your opinions that are in argument with what is. How do you know that something is not in alignment with reality? Basically, it's going to cause conflict. So how many beliefs hold up to that standard? How many beliefs become true if you hold them up to that? Not much, does it? Well, ultimately, if you look at it, none of them, but each person has to find that for themselves. But I just want to help so you start to feel that openness, that love of what's real. And if there's not knowing what's real, it's the love of the unknown as well, right? The love of, wow, it's suddenly all called into question. All my views, all my ideas, including all my spiritual ideas, and all, they're all called into question. And when you're in this love of truth, there's something within you that will like that. Oh, energizing. Wow, because now everything becomes possible again, right? When you have that, you can't be stopped. If you have that kind of love of truth, you'll end up with it. You can't not. And when that informs everything you do, whether it's coming here or the times we spend in silence, you know the old saying from the Bible, be still and know. And there's a surface understanding of be still. And that is, be still, right? Don't move, be quiet, be still, and know. And that's part of it, that's the surface. But the deeper understanding is, what does to be still mean? Be still in your mind. Be still in asserting your belief, your opinion, be still. Still all of that. If you become still, if the egoic mind isn't continually asserting itself, there is a stillness, and a vast, vast stillness. It's the stillness of the me becoming quiet, no longer asserting itself, defending itself. And when you enter into that quiet, the knowing, that direct realization that, aha, the knowing arises all by itself. You can't make reality present itself. You can't force it to. You can't beg it into existence either. It comes from a moment of stillness again, meaning that place where the mind is totally open, not asserting its own conditioned past. That's when the knowing leaps in, all by itself, of its own accord. And when it does, then we know that even realization, it's not a personal thing. It's not like, I realize I'm spirit. It's spirit realizes it's spirit, right? One spirit. If you realize what you are, you realize what everybody and everything is. If it's just about you, It's a high-level spiritual delusion. Right? I am spirit, I am light, and I am it's all me, I have attained the great realization. You know, when someone asked the Buddha, what have you attained through the great enlightenment? And the Buddha said, I've attained absolutely nothing through supreme unexcelled enlightenment. You see, most people will go, whoa, do you got an hour? I'll tell you what it got me. Right? But from a different perspective, that is not even a concern, because it can't get you what you always and already were. If you get anything, you get just realizing that this is what you always and already were. This is what everybody always and already is. Whether they're deluded or undiluted, they are what they are. They are already purely spirit, the nothingness which is everything. Nobody becomes that, they are it. Right? You are it before you realize it, and you are it after you realize it. But a fat lot of good that does you if you don't realize it. Right? But nonetheless, we are, so nothing is gained. That's the great humor of it. Nothing is gained in the great realization, right? You realize, if anything, it's like the great embarrassment. How did I miss this? I mean, this was the only thing that was ever going on. How did I miss it? That's usually part of what you sense is, how on earth did I not see the only thing there is to see? How did I miss realizing the only thing there ever was to realize? You know, it's very mysterious. But the answer is not so mysterious. The answer is actually quite simple. Because we believed ourselves and others to be something totally different. We were just mistaken. We, as it says in Christianity, we sinned, which means to miss the mark. Wouldn't that be nice if they had told everybody the translation of that word? Which would be the translation, by the way, of the people who originally heard the word. What they heard was something more akin to missing the mark. Not this terrible thing that's been given to us, this other definition, which really has no basis in the meaning of the word when it was originally spoken, to miss the mark. Oh, I just missed the mark. Buddha called it ignorance. Jesus called it missing the mark. Buddha then said, what's the antidote? Wake up. What's the antidote for Jesus? Repent, right? Which means turn around. You missed the mark, turn around. It doesn't mean get on your knees and cry and, and feel guilty and full of shame. It means turn around. You missed the mark, turn around. Like you're going to someone's house and they call you on the cell phone. Well, I just drove past da-da-da and da-da-da. You said, well, you drove right past the house. Turn that thing around and get back over here, right? Repent, turn around. But imagine if the person that's listening had a moralistic idea of repent. Repent. Oh, should I? I'm not turning around. I'm not worthy. I'm sorry. Could you imagine? There you'd be on the other end of the line going, no, that has nothing to do with it. Get over yourself and just turn around. Which is actually a wonderful expression, right? It's just you're looking in the wrong direction. You're looking at an image of yourself. That's not you. What do most people do? I got to get rid of the image. No, just turn around. Look at what's looking. Don't look at your idea of yourself. Forget about improving it. It's improving an illusion, you know? It's putting pearls on the pig. I don't know about you, but I love that image, you know. Probably because both my grandfathers were farmers, I don't know. But can you see how easily it just very easily, very innocently, this whole spiritual thrust goes astray? One thing that's missed, that's an understanding that's not in alignment with reality, right? From the eyes that are awake, it's so clear. Oh, the most that can happen is you just miss the mark. You just get it wrong because you don't understand. So you just need a change of direction. You need to turn around. You need to look elsewhere. It's so simple, right? There's no blame in that. There's no should in that. There's no nothing. Which means there's plenty of energy to make a correction. But when you get a different idea of a judgmental idea, a guilt-producing idea, an idea that you should earn realization, that you should earn the realization of who you are, when you get these ideas that aren't in harmony with what is, you waste immense amounts of energy, right? So most people, even in the spiritual, those who are endeavoring to really towards enlightenment, have just wasted immense amounts of energy through no fault of their own. There's no fault in this. It's all just ignorance, misunderstanding, missing the mark. But see if when one has a love of truth, you look at everything for yourself. One of the greatest gifts that the Buddha gave just before he died, be a lamp unto yourself. Don't believe it because the Buddha said it. Don't believe it because I say it. Don't believe it because the greatest avatar whose lotus feet ever touched the earth said it. Look into it for yourself. Everybody has that capacity. Everybody can do it. If only you let yourself do it. Look for yourself. Because when you realize something for yourself, it's yours, isn't it? It's not the Buddha's, it's not Adyashanti's, it's not anybody else's. It's realized in you, by you. And nobody can take that away. And it's not based on a belief, or an opinion, or a hope, or a dream. It's just opening your eyes. As if from a dream. Oh, I thought my dream was real. But it wasn't. This is what's real. I thought I was the name on my birth certificate. But that wasn't real. That didn't define me. So if you want to get to spirit, you start from spirit. Okay, let's see what's on your mind. Come on up. Or in your heart, or wherever it may be. Good evening, my friend.
Hi, Adya.
Hey.
I'm hoping you can help me get my bearings.
Okay.
In April, I went on a series of retreats. I went, spent 9 days with Byron Katie, and then a Silmar with you, and then another retreat. So I would have thought, I guess I expected after this triple header to be, I thought something nice would happen.
What happened? What did happen?
It's been hell since I came back. I mean, and it's not.
How so?
I'm experiencing depression and anxiety like I've never experienced in my life, to the point where,
Yes.
I mean, there was a week where I was sleeping about 2 or 3 hours a night. I finally had to go to my doctor and get some sleeping pills just so I could function during the day.
I understand. And what's that sleeplessness, anxiety based on, do you imagine?
Yeah. And the first thing that comes to mind is there's no turning back.
Oh yeah, you've gone a little too far now. Yeah, really. No, I know that feeling. I remember precisely when the same realization hit me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh God, it's like I danced around the fire, and now, now the fire. Now I don't have to dance around the fire. It follows me everywhere I go. Yeah, that it's not a game that you get to choose when to play or not to play. Yeah. So that one can be a little scary. Yeah.
Well, the way it's coming up for me is complete delusion. I mean, I seem to be completely in the egoic delusion, not
How so?
at all. Well, I mean, the worry and the anxiety, I'll focus on work. You know, it's like, that's what they always used to focus on. It's just been amped up now tenfold. It's like, this is the strategy that really works for my ego for distraction. And
so what's the what's underlying anxiety about work?
something about security and survival.
That's it. Right. Because our work is our means of continuing.
That's right.
Right? Right.
I don't derive an identity from my work, but I do derive security. I mean, material security.
And survival.
Yes.
From a standpoint of a human body and mind.
Right.
In our culture, you got to work, you got to earn money in order to buy stuff so you can survive.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a problem as long as you think that you can die. Right? It's a problem then. Because if work goes down the tubes, maybe I won't survive. Anxiety producing, right? Yeah. So to start to see that it's not really about work, it's about survival.
Any more direction on that?
Well, sure. Survival issues always come back to how we see ourselves, do they not? Always come back to our sense of self, because after all, it's going to be me that may not survive. I may not make it. So it always comes back to our self-concept, our idea about ourself. As long as that idea about ourselves is limited simply to something that exists in time and space, since that idea is not in harmony with what is, it's going to be anxiety producing. That's just like when we're not in harmony with what is, it causes discord of some sort. Depression, anxiety, anger, shame, guilt, you name it. There's many kinds of discord. Everybody has their own favorite ones. The favorite ones that you hate, you know. But there's a discord. So in this case, you're dealing with survival. So the discord has to do with how you see yourself. If you're seeing yourself in a way that's not really true, and so you're feeling that discord, that's the anxiety, that's the staying up at night. Because your concept of yourself is mortal.
Is what?
Mortal. your idea of yourself, to your idea of yourself, it is, survival is a very, very, very high value, right? If we see ourselves ultimately, and I don't mean intellectually, because we can have all sorts of spiritual ideas in our mind, but emotionally, if we hold ourselves emotionally, unconsciously, as a mortal being, then we are going to be prone to anxiety, are we not? I mean, because you could lose your job at any time, you could get sick at any time, and, well, if we tell the truth, this terrible, awful, dreaded, anxiety-producing event called death, it's a certainty. I mean, what could be worse than that? That the worst thing that the very thing that people are afraid of, almost more than anything else, is the one thing that's guaranteed. Odd, isn't it? That we're terrified of the most unavoidable fact of physical existence. So it always comes back to your sense of yourself, right? So again, to really start to see, know those ideas about yourself, right? Because unless those ideas become really conscious in your mind, you can't work with them, can you? Like you said, you did a 9-day Byron Katie retreat, right? Unless you get the ideas, you can't write them down. You can't ask, can I really know that this can be true? And you can't ask, who would I be without this thought?
That's where I'm stuck. Nothing's coming up. It's like stopped.
And so nothing. What? When you say nothing's coming up,
except for the superficial stuff about I've got this project at work and I have to figure out every detail here at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Right. Okay. But that might have a mild form of anxiety, but it doesn't talk. That's not really the kind of anxiety we're talking about, I don't think.
Well, that's how it appears in my mind. Is
right. It's this project.
Yes.
Right. You notice when that project's done, then the next one will be anxiety producing?
Yes.
Just like the other 10 before that, right?
Yes.
Anxiety producing, right?
Uh-huh.
Because unconsciously, my life, as far as the ego is concerned, my life depends on everything. It depends on my project. It depends on the people in my life. If you leave me, I'll die. I'm not saying people think that in their head so much as they actually feel it in their being. Right? If I lose my job, I won't exist. If I screw up this project, I will die. It doesn't make rational sense that if I fail this project, I'll die. But emotionally,
no, that's exactly how it's feeling.
That's how the egos operate.
Yeah.
Everything is a life or death situation as far as the ego is concerned. Right?
Right.
Egos feel death all the time. Someone disagrees with an ego. The ego, it's like a kind of death. Oh God. So there you are, right at the gate of where spirituality is delivering you, right at the gate of ego death.
Yes.
Right? Die while you're alive so you can live. Die while you're alive so you can live. That which is trying to survive, number one, can't. Number two, it's not there in the first place.
Okay, that helps.
Does that help a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you really start to touch into what is it that's living? I mean, our idea of what's living right now is the same thing as our idea of what's going to die. I'm living, I'm going to die. Right? This is no different than the concern, although for a different reason. It's the same thing that propelled, the great Indian sage Ramana Maharshi to lay on the floor and pretend like he was dying, asking himself, who dies? Because a relative died and he got a little afraid of death, but he was also curious, which is that truth thing, right? I'm afraid of death, but I'm more curious about it. If I'm just afraid of death, I'm not going to lay on my floor and pretend to die and see what happens. But if I'm afraid of death, but I'm more curious about what will happen, which means I'm more curious about the truth than I am about avoiding it, then I'll lay there and ask the question, gee, what would it be like to die? See, that's someone who's consciously joining with their fear. What would it be like to die? And what is it that would die? You get the feel? And what is it that remains?
That I don't see.
You will. It's coming. You've been set up, right? Because you're actually engaged in. It's the same process, right? Whether I'm asking the question, right? Who would you be? Who would you be when your idea of yourself died? Right? Die now while you're alive, so that you can truly live.
Yeah.
Right? Or it's the same thing when you go to Byron Katie's workshop and she works through all the questions that she does, and the key question is, who would you be without that? Right? Mm-hmm. Most people will say something like, I feel really good now. And they end it. But the question is really much deeper than how do you feel when you let go of your idea. That's how most people hear it, right? How do I feel? I feel relief, I feel good, I feel, oh, how nice. Which is great. But if they really took the question seriously, who would I be without that belief? Then they're engaged in the ultimate process. In the ultimate realization, which isn't, I just feel better when I see through my belief. That's nice. Remember I said the love of truth? Not just feeling better. Feeling better is, wow, I did this kind of spiritual work and it made me feel better to let go of my belief. But there's the question. Who would you be without it? That's a concern that's transcendent of how you feel, because you might feel really good when you let go of the belief, but your transcendent concern will be love of truth. The love of truth will go, yeah, now that I feel good, who is it that feels good? Okay? Because feeling good is just the opposite of feeling bad, and they alternate just as sure as the sun coming up in the morning and going down at nighttime. And so does life and death. Death follows life as surely as life follows death. And to be attached to either one is to be on what the Buddha called the wheel of samsara, right? Mm-hmm. I'll give you a hint that what you really are was never born. What was born was the appearance of you. And a wonderful appearance it is. All these appearances, wonderful. Birth is the appearance of us, spirit coming into form. Like, wow, look at what I can appear as. Not what I can become, what I appear as. So this wonderful appearance happens at birth. Spirit appearing to be somebody. Wonderful appearance. Congratulations, Spirit, you pulled it off. The difficulty becomes when Spirit, which is the very substance and being of all appearances, forgets itself. I am the appearance that I created. That's suffering, right? Because then the appearance must go. Anything that appears must disappear. Anything. And so it's frightening. And so everything underneath is threatening to the appearance, right? Because maybe my going will happen faster if something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. Right? So you appear to be this person. I appear to be this person. It's wonderful. It's fine. It's a beautiful manifestation of spirit. It's absolutely lovely. Until the appearance has caused us to go into a trance, to forgetfulness of our true nature. Or what you really are was never born. It just appeared to be born. And the ocean appears to become a wave, doesn't it? But the ocean really doesn't become, the entirety of the ocean doesn't become a wave, does it? The wave is an appearance that just sort of ripples on the surface. It's nice. It's not separate from the ocean. There's nothing about a wave that's other than the ocean. Not a single drop of anything in the wave is anything other than the ocean. And yet the wave will arise, have its little lifespan, and disappear. And to the wave's perspective, that is a disaster. Right? Being born, whoopee, life, good and bad, but basically it's nice to be alive. And then disappearance, oh God, I'm going to go out of existence. Right? So from the perspective of the appearance, it's all quite threatening. From the perspective of the ocean, the appearance can be enjoyed, appreciated, even when it arises and is born. The ocean is still what it always was, isn't it? Didn't become anything. That's like you and I. We are whatever we want to call it. Tonight I'm just calling it spirit. We could call it anything you want, consciousness, whatever. The nothing that's everything. We are the no thing that appeared and then it disappears. All right.
Thank you.
Let me know how it goes. Yeah. But when you get all this, you put yourself in this situation where you really immersed yourself, right, in this discovery, and that immersion, that's what comes from spirit, from your true nature. That's its thrust. It's like its thrust is, awakening. It doesn't give a darn what it takes, right? That's what it does. And the appearance has its spiritual idea, and for the appearance at certain times will go, I really like this is cool, this is like spiritual, and I really enjoy this, or whatever. And then at some point, it kind of gets real, and the appearance is like, oh, and they're talking about illusion, they're talking about me. Right? And this spirituality, it's not a means of avoiding me, and it's not a means of avoiding my fear and my anxiety. It's a means of going right through the heart of it. Avoiding would be, I want to feel better. Going through the heart of it is, I want to know the truth of it. I want to know the truth of this thing called me. And so at that's when, the exterior self gets very, very nervous, because there is the possibility of a change, what I call a change of occupancy. It's like in the East, they have this wonderful sort of way of talking about it, which is called the host and guest and the guest and host theory. And it's basically when your guest comes to your house, but they act like they are the host, the owner, it's chaos. When the owner of the house is always the owner of the house, then the guest can come and go and everything's fine, as long as the guest knows that they're not the host. Right? Nice. But in our lives, ego comes visiting, and it takes up the position of the host. Mm-hmm. This is my house, my body, my mind, it's mine. And then that gets a little tiring, and I would like some relief of that, and then the relief starts to come, but the relief is basically, it's not spoken this way, but basically the relief is the deep abiding understanding that ego, you that are playing the part of the host, you're not. There's a change of occupancy right in the center of you. And what change, if we think we're the ego, that change of occupancy is very frightening. It might even feel like death. At the very least, it's going to be a bit disconcerting.
Smart way to put it.
Yeah, but at the moment of that transition, all of a sudden it's fine, because that realization of you never were the egoic self. The appearance never defined who you are. You always were the host. You just forgot. And so the very thing that seems so threatening becomes the cause of nirvana. Or as Jesus used to say, the kingdom of heaven. Let me know how it goes.
Okay. Thank you, Adya.
I was just about to say have fun, but it's more accurate to say it's having fun with you, apparently. Yeah, that's the way it goes. Come on up. Yeah. You all know some of you know what I'm talking about, don't you? You know that when that transition comes, you're chasing God and then you realize God's chasing you? Or as Ramana would say, getting your head caught in the tiger's mouth. You know, you put it in there and a few times, it's exciting, you think you're getting away with something until the jaws clenched shut. Good evening.
Hi, Adya. So I thought I loved truth.
You thought you what?
I thought I loved
You
truth.
thought you wanted truth, yeah.
And tonight I really got in touch with that I loved truth married.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Well, my search for truth and stuff kind of coincided with meeting my wife, early
great.
on.
Lovely.
Now we're not together.
Uh-huh.
And,
Lovely too.
Yeah, and it's just, it's 20 years later, and it's just kind of shocking to be aware that there's a part of me that for the last 6 months has just lost it, and other things have been so much more important, and I'm really scared the search for truth in a sense has a kind of a lonely aspect, and
Can be.
Yeah. And I don't even know what the question is exactly, but
there may not be a question. But the interesting thing is, there are times for most everybody that, I'm talking about this as if it's totally absolute, a lover of truth at every instant. But, the human fact is that there's extraordinarily few human beings who are actually going to be sort of an absolute love of truth in every moment, no matter what happens. That's not necessarily, it doesn't mean that, one never sort of, something else doesn't become important. It's more like the general trajectory, right? And the general value. It doesn't mean you're perfect. Human beings aren't perfect. There's no perfection on that level, that order of being, that level of existence. So isn't it interesting, although you may question, do I really want truth? Or you may even think you don't want truth, that here you are here, and talking to me and up in front of a microphone where the only thing they're talking about is truth.
And I've realized that nonetheless it has been present in my life, but just the percentage has been lower.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it's been. And we'll see what it becomes in any given moment. What it's been doesn't matter, my friend. What it has been does not matter. If you can completely say, forget it, I want nothing to do with any of this truth stuff, I'm just going to go off and do whatever I do or whatever, and you can do it for 5 years, and the nice thing is existence doesn't hold it against you. It's in any given moment, the past is not relevant. It's not relevant the last minute in terms of what we're speaking about is not relevant.
It's just those moments where you become awake to something, and then and tonight was that moment. It was like, oh, look at that. And
yeah. Well, you see it then, and the scene will have its own influence, right? Far be it from me to try to dictate what you see, what the influence of it is.
And in that moment of awakening to it, there's that moment of remorse. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's just a physical sensation like everything else.
Yeah, well, the remorse is, of course, generally based on an idea of what shouldn't have happened.
Oh,
what
thank you.
shouldn't be, right? And is there any actual evidence that
None.
It shouldn't have been?
None.
No, apparently not. Because, of course, the funny thing about our ideas of what shouldn't be or shouldn't have happened are all arguments with what is, aren't they? Because what is what is, and is what was.
Right.
And that's reality. And then we have an idea of what should have been. We argue with reality, and then we wonder why we feel bad about it.
Right.
Right? I feel ashamed. Why? Because reality didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just almost like somebody threw water on my face and woke me up.
Yes, that's the part that's useful. That part where you go, oh, wow. Or you kind of come out of a certain trance state. That's useful. The remorse is not. The remorse will put you back into another trance state called remorse.
Right.
Right? So you'll go back to sleep through feeling bad about what was, instead of the other possibility, which is kind of that cold water on the face. Wow, I see that I haven't really been holding or been conscious of what my own deepest value really might be. I don't know what happened. It just kind of disappeared. But now you know it, right? So that's a certain kind of consciousness.
And now I'm scared of looking for having that focus single. You know, it's just that's what the feeling is right now.
That's
in
funny.
This moment.
Take it. I mean? Well, work with it a little bit then. You know, because it's just that's also based on an idea. If the truth is my single highest concern, right? Which don't get an abstract notion of truth, okay?
No, I don't think I you know what I mean? It's just
I get it.
A way of being that I've had, so I understand what it feels like previously.
I know, but I want to expand it a little bit, okay? Because the interest, the love affair of truth, isn't just the love affair with those moments when clarity comes. It's not just a love affair with some ultimate idea of truth. I mean, it's heading in that direction, certainly, but it's also the truth of this moment. And this moment is always very gritty, very real, and very practical, right? What's the truth of this moment? Any moment. You're talking to someone. What's the truth of this moment? Something's happening. You're getting married. What's the truth of this moment? You're getting divorced. What's the truth of this instant? Am I in resistance with life? And if I am, what am I believing that's putting me there? Because there's no reason to be in resistance to life that's going to feel good. They're all going to feel bad. Right? And so, even in a very practical sense, I see spirituality as simultaneously something about ultimate truth, ultimate value, ultimate being, and simultaneously with this truth right here, right now, in the most practical, everyday, moment-to-moment situations. And in all of it, whether it's ultimate or this little moment of my life right here now, the beauty of truth is that you can come out of suffering right now, in each and every little moment. And when you really, start to see it that way, then you don't just have it seen in terms of profound big moments or just ultimate moments, although those are important, but also all the little moments.
Sometimes it seems like the resistance can even when I want to look at the belief underneath it, sometimes it feels like the resistance just
Too big?
yeah. Hurricane strength resistance, you know?
Then at that moment for you, maybe it is too big. Okay, welcome to humanhood, my friend. Sometimes the resistance is too big. I hope you don't think you're special in that regard.
No, I don't.
No, look around here a little bit, right? But at any other moment, that also can be the next thing, you know. You're not going to have perfection as a human being in all this. It's just a trajectory here. But even the resistance to truth, it comes after, truth comes after you all the time. What's this resistance? What is the resistance, right? So even that can become the new object of what's really real here. Even the resistance, even not wanting to ask the question.
Right.
And then sometimes you'll just chuck it all overboard and you'll go do whatever the hell you want to do. And like I said, welcome to humanhood. Don't get too stuck on it. Because if you get stuck on that with remorse or regret or blame, all those are just ways of resisting reality, right?
Right.
And they cause you to go more asleep. If resisting a reality worked, if resisting yourself worked, believe me, I'd be telling people to resist themselves. It's just so clear. It's so unimaginably clear to anybody has even one eye a quarter of the way open that resisting oneself doesn't work. Change doesn't happen that way. Transformation does not happen that way. It happens through something else entirely. But it ain't resistance. That's for sure. If it was resistance, then all those people that were saying, starting January 1st on New Year's Eve, I will stop eating 2 pints of Haagen-Dazs every night. And they would follow it through if resistance worked. But it doesn't. You don't change that way. Nobody changes that way. Nobody transforms that way. Nobody wakes up that way. It's a trance state. It doesn't mean that you just go, well, then lump it. It just means, wait a minute, maybe there's something other than resistance, struggle, and there's something other than indulgence, which is just saying, forget it. There's something in between those two, isn't there?
Yeah.
Which isn't resisting, and it's not just indulging, going to sleep. And you can't say exactly what that is, but when you just entertain it, it just induces sort of a quietness and a state of heightened awareness. It's all about awareness. All about awareness. And not resisting what you're aware of.
There are times where that happens.
I know. That's why I'm trying to impart something here, right? I'm really trying to impart something here that's not a technique. Maybe I'll succeed, maybe I won't. Neither one of us know, right? It's not up to me, it's not up to you. I always want to give you this last little piece before we go. I've said this many times in satsang, so some people have heard this many times, but nonetheless, it was said by one of my favorite enlightened guys, a Jesuit priest of all people.
Anthony?
Yeah, Anthony DeMello. Yeah, Anthony DeMello. Really great, bright, awake guy. And he used to start off a lot of what he said. He said, look, in order for us to to even start, he says, we have to have a basic understanding between us, him and his audience. He'd say, look, you have to understand this basic thing before any awakening is possible. This is what it is. I'm an ass and you're an ass. Now get over it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So he was trying to impart the same thing. It was like, just come out of that whole mind state, get over it. And then once you get over it, you can get conscious. Right? If we never get over it, if we never get over ourselves, if one doesn't get over their own imperfections, if we're continually surprised, oh God, I'm so imperfect. Why? You've been imperfect the whole time. I mean, what are you surprised about? When we get over that, then what you find is a tremendous amount of capacity to stay conscious floods into your system. Because self-loathing and self-judgment, this all just drains immense amounts of psychic energy out of our system. Yeah, so just remember Anthony.
All right.
You know, you're an ass, I'm an ass, now get over it. Right?
Yeah.
And then there's a freedom in that. You know, there's a freedom in that because there's no judgment in that. There's
Right.
just sort of a statement about something about human beings that we need to hear, and hear it with humor, with good humor, without hearing it like, oh, I don't want to hear that.
Right.
All right, my
Okay.
friend. Nice to talk with you.
Nice to talk.
Yeah. That's why a guy like Jesus could, you know, he could hear the most ridiculous things and people doing the most terrible things or having terrible pasts or whatever, and he never got hung up on what somebody told him, you know, about their past, about what they are, their station in life, whatever. It was like, you know, it was sort of like, so what? Let's get on with it. So you've done this, so you've done that, so you've done that. So what? I am presenting to you the kingdom of heaven, he'd say. Why are you telling me about the person that you were? Right? The kingdom of heaven does not care about the person that you were. That's the beauty of it. That's why we call it grace. It's not deserved. It's not earned. It's not merit gained. It's grace. Do you know? Being a really nice person does not get you merit in terms of awakening. That doesn't mean be a jerk, but it's that forgiveness. That view where you see there is nothing to forgive even. Namaste. Nice to be with you.